When I was very young, my cousin was at the junior art school, and we used to meet up on Saturdays, and we used to go to Cross Lane Market in Salford. We were coming home, and the lights were just coming up on the stalls. And the fat was coming on to fry at Parker's chip shop, and on the telly it was wrestling. Outside Salford Hippodrome it said, "Strip, strip, hooray, we've nothing on tonight." I said, I love it, and it's not going to last like this, and I want to preserve it like flies in amber. And that's when I first thought, maybe I could do it with words.
When you wrote it, was it already set in the past, even though it was 1960?
As a writer, you must know that you can't write about today absolutely, because all you've got is yesterday to draw on.
Were these characters based on people you knew, particularly the women?
Well, the opening line of Elsie's is...
Hey, Elsie, just about ready for the knacker yard.
My Auntie Lily said, "You want to watch that bugger?" She says, "You have to keep your mouth shut, else a fortnight later it's on television."
In early December 1960, the first episode of the longest-running series on British television was broadcast live in Manchester. It was in black and white, it was local, it had 13 episodes in front of it, and after the second episode, many of the distinguished and full of good taste rulers of Granada television, from which it came, thought it had had its day. It had been proposed by a young homosexual, Tony Warren, who lived at that time, as so many did, in fear of imprisonment for what he did with his private life. And he'd gone down to Salford Market, Saturday Night Fever at Salford Market on a Saturday, and seen fish and chip shops and bright lights and people milling around, and thought, I've got to bottle this, which he did. He sold it to the powers that were. It had a local run, it broke every rule, it was very northern, it was matriarchal, but it was full of great character actors and humour, and Tony Warren had something of a genius about him, because that first episode has been running for 55 years and shows no signs of diminishing in importance in the schedules and in its attraction to viewers. It's a phenomenon. Some of the best television writers got their grounding there, whether it was Ewan McGovern or Paul Abbott or Kay Mellor. Some of the best directors got their grounding there. Fine actors have been there, and the nation took it to its heart. It's as much part of Britain as, well, it's more part of Britain than anything except the monarchy.
I was a rather sissyish little boy, and I used to go to my grandma's, or I'd go to my mother's friends' houses. And then I used to watch very carefully the differences between men and women. And I used to go under the kitchen table at my grandma's and look out from underneath the bottom of the chenille cloth and think, that's what men say, and that's what women say.
Hey, ma'am, we've got a visitor.
Oh.
Me dad.
Thank God we've finished.
Eh?
I never could abide men who were going bald.
Well, there's plenty as can.
Aye, that's what they say. But you know what they're really thinking? I wonder what he was like when he had all his hair.
I grew up in a matriarchal society. I was surrounded, all the men were at war, and I was surrounded by strong women. And I expected that when the men came back, the men would take over and bugles would sound at the end of the streets and tom-toms would be beaten, and it wasn't a bit like that. The women just raised their voices to be heard, a bit louder, and went on just as they had done before.
Yeah?
Never you do that again, you frighten the life out of me.
What can I get you?
We're quite all right, thank you.
Well, you see what that notice says? Ladies are kindly requested not to remain at the bar after being served.
Packet of crisps, Martha, get me purse.
But I think northern women are strong. They look after their men.
When he first came in, he was quite aggressive. And I didn't like him that much. And I softened him a little bit.
Over there, eh? This man is MPEX. This man is under his wife's thumb. This man is a Feckless article.
One of the writers got him into an argument with Vera where he lost. And I enjoyed that. I thought, yeah, he's the kind of guy that would lose.
They've always dominated the street, the women. Firstly, because I think they were written that way. And secondly, because in the North, in this sort of environment, you very often find that the women are the dominant factor in a family.
Oh, Luke, I don't care if it only costs 2 pence. It's no good and I'm not having it.
Oh, give over. It's better than nout.
Oh, story of my life is that. Better than nout. It'll do. Yeah, well, I've had a sickener of better than nout. You can get rid of it, and yourself and all. And if you want to do me a favour, take him with you.
Can you think of anybody, any man in the early episodes who would, in your view, stand up, have the stature of several women we could both reel off?
Swindley. A little turkey cock, but Swindley, yes.
Now, there's no need to carry on like this, Mrs. Sharples. We're just giving you fair warning.
Fair? Who else do you think's going to take this lousy job if I give it up? Go on, answer me that.
Well, we shall have to face up to that if and when the time comes, shan't we? But it will come, Mrs. Sharples, unless you take notice of what I'm saying.
There was a great figure in my childhood called my Auntie Polly Duck, and my Auntie Polly Duck used to say, I know your faults and love you still. And that's what those early episodes of Coronation Street are. It's me looking at the North and saying, yes, I know your faults, but love you still.
I think I do still see Tony's ideas in there. It's about a community. It's, yes, it is, you know, a matriarchal society. You know, you think about Audrey and Rita and all those lovely, rich characters that have been and gone and have come back up, you know, they're rising again. You get the next, you know, the next generation of the matriarchs. And, you know, I think it's wonderful. And just to hear the music, does something to you, which is, you know, which is actually quite astounding, really, that it can have that effect. Just the music. You know that you're going to sit and watch a fantastic story, and you're going to be with characters that you're familiar with, you know, and that's wonderful to have created that legacy, and that's from Tony. That's where it started.
When you think about it, the three that really endeared themselves to the public were the world's biggest snob.
Oh, my idea of heaven is doing a foxtrot on a French chalked floor, knowing I look right.
Somebody who was downright evil.
Right. Did your mother or did she not stand screaming blue murder in the middle of Coronation Street at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Should have thought it kept you up.
Up, the whole street was up.
And something precious close to a prostitute. And, of course, writing for Vi or Doris Speed or for Pat Phoenix was, ooh, I mean, I should be so lucky to have the trio like that again in my life. Doris Speed was the best Judith Bliss in Hay Fever I ever saw. She was superb. I remember she had a purple dress with a silver stripe down the middle, and when she got indignant, the stripe quivered. Now, that takes great technique, you know, to be able to do that.
That's a very particular physique, Tony.
Without generalising here, about Northerners is that they say what they think. They call a spade a shovel. As all the women on the street do it, and it's almost like a patter. And Vera is very typical of it.
What do you mean you're tired? You were never tired when you worked for Beck Gilroy, were you? Oh, no. Now, listen, I phoned them up and they're ready. All you've got to do is give them the cheque and they'll give you the tills.
That's it, I'll just pour it across.
Right. You haven't time for that. Look, we're off in a couple of hours. Here, get going. I don't know. Just when things are going well, he tries to spoil it. Oh, poorest one, Betsy.
You wanted a word then, did you?
Oh, well, like I say, I've been observing and you don't do much, do you?
Thank you, Rover's bar, just here.
I think 75% of the success of the street, the continuity of the street, is the sound of the North, the rhythm of the voices.
You come across a Mrs. Tanner yet?
I can't say I have.
You will. You want to watch her? She's a bad one. Oh, while I think on, you owe me an egg. Eh? One of them I had this morning was off.
You should have brought it back.
Brought it back? I told a pot towel to my nose before I could so much as take it to my back in. And if my word's not good enough, you're quite welcome. Come and smell at my dustbin.
The other things, there'll be 3 and 4.
I'll put them on slate. You don't need to worry. I'm not thinking of running away.
You're going to waste time doing your eyes. We'll never get finished.
Just listen to us talking.
Yeah, well, all I'm saying is we've got to clear this lot up before my mother gets home.
Because don't forget, it came out of, and Tony Warren came out of a time, the 60s, when, you know, Alan Sillitoe and John Brain, you know, Room at the Top and all that sort of thing was going on, and it was all social realism. And for the first time, it was beginning to be thought interesting to write about ordinary people and about the working class. And of course, that's also long ago, that what's happening now with Coronation Street, they still sort of cling to that idea, but it's almost a pastiche or a parody of what went on before.
In a sense, it disguised itself as sort of northern realism, part of Saturday Night and Sunday Morning and The Long Distance Runner and so on. But it was a highly theatrical piece, really, wasn't it?
Yes, it was highly theatrical. I came from the theatre.
Is the humour particularly northern, do you think?
Yes. It's the nearest thing to Jewish humour. It's very wry. Adversity breeds backbone and telling comment.
Is it something that you think came out of the north, cultivated in the clubs and in the music halls? In the earlier episodes, let's say the Ina Sharples routine are almost music hall routines.
The woman is a woman who has been to music halls and seen routine.
What about your own association with it? You wrote the first 13 straight off, as I understand it.
Yes.
Which is an enormous task. What happened after that?
Well, then it was obvious that I couldn't carry on writing it, and then the blokes took over. It was very odd that this loving but slightly ironic view that I'd taken of the north of England could be viewed from a totally different angle and still made to work. But they came in and they'd never seen anything like me in their lives before, most of them. And here was I, and I'd invented it. And it got a bit unpleasant. It got very unpleasant because I was openly gay at a time when it was not considered very sensible to be openly gay. But somebody had to stand up and say, yes, I'm gay. But they ganged up. They really did gang up as well. And I don't think they even knew they'd done it until there was a terrible morning. There was a story conference. And I sat there and I listened and I listened and I listened. And then I got to my feet. Nobody gets to their feet to address story conference. And I said, gentlemen, I have sat here and listened to 2 puff jokes, to an actor referred to as a puff, to a line dismissed because it's puffy. And I would remind you that without a puff, none of you would be in work this morning. And nothing was ever quite the same after that.
Do you think that it could only have been invented by a gay man then, Tony?
Yes. Only this gay man, I think, could have written it. Well, people say I was, he was 23 when he wrote it. How could he know so much? But believe you me, a gay guy who's been out on the scene since the age of 16, at 23, is Elsie Tanner. Then I found something very frightening. I found that a writer has a voice, and I had used my voice very effectively in the early episodes of the show. All the writers who'd followed had been encouraged to pick up where I left off. So they picked up the tone of voice. And I discovered that my style had become common property. I'm not at all sure that there weren't people who could do it better than I did.
Right. You know, something like that. Every lying bit of gossip that goes about what you don't know you make up. We don't need sewers around here. We've got Ina Sharples.
I got something wrong with a woman that can't hang on to her husband.
At least mine wasn't carried out feet first.
What do you mean by that, eh? What do you mean by that? Are you listening to this? This is what you was witnesses after this.
By the end of the 60s, Coronation Street was established as the nation's favourite programme. But Warren, its creator, had descended into an amnesia of drugs and alcohol. He emerged over a decade later. He now enjoys a successful career as a novelist. How would you describe your current role in the programme, Tony?
I have been turned into a grand old man rather earlier than is usual. They send for me when they can't think of any other bugger to ask. It has hills and valleys. And when it's on the hills, oh yes, it's very definitely my programme. But when it's down in the valleys, I'm the one that people stop and smack with shopping bags and say, what are you doing to it? Because people care desperately about the show.
There's a pub on the corner and a corner shop on the other one. And it's life, isn't it? People are friendly, the neighbours, they're nosy, but they care about each other. I mean, sometimes when we finish filming and they say that's a wrap, I think, oh, I'd love to go in that little house, you know, and switch telly on and, you know, even with pigeons in the backyard, it just seems inviting.
Coronation Street is 4 miles in any one direction from the centre of Manchester. Emotionally, it's wherever you want it to be in your own heart.
The whole thing, then. It's great.
But this plum job, I think we do need to know what it is, because it ultimately has to be whatever it is that takes him away. So is it still Lois stuffed? Or
Do we, well, come back to that. Yes, it's to do with the fact that we were setting up a story that we've changed our minds about, so we should take all the setup of it out.
Yes, exactly that. Because what it's become is better than what it was going to be that we hadn't actually worked out.
Coronation Street story conferences are a game of consequences. Every 3 weeks you come back for another round of the same game of consequences. You pick up the best question to ask at any Coronation Street story conference is, where did we leave off?
In the trade, they call him Firmin the Merman. He's half man, half fish. and
Ray has the comb and the glass in his hand.
Yeah, and one thing leads to another, and he's the man with the codpiece.
I think
To call it a soap is actually, for me, a bit disparaging. I think it's a long-running drama series, that's what it is. And it takes enormous, you know, talent to do that. Massive amount of talent, because it chews people up and people get totally burnt out. Writers can get burnt out, you know. So to endure, as Coronation Street has endured, it has to be surrounded by talent. And that, you know, the first talent was Tony Warren, the Bill Podmores, all the Harry Kershaw, you know, all those writers, Julian Roach, John Stevenson, those people, Adele Rose, sat round that table cooking, you know, cooking up stories, just brilliant. You know, Tom Elliott, who was the storyliner with Paul Abbott, all these people cared so much about this show, and that's why it is where it is. That's why it's still where it is.
The way you leave often depends on how you have behaved during the time you've been in the show. I was given a very nice, dignified exit, and I can always go back if I want to.
Go back, you stupid bitch!
The cast are kept in line by the storylines, and if we want a character to leave, we will write them out.
The reason that we've ended up with the character that we've now got is because I tried to do something which is very far removed from me. Which is terribly easy to slip into, providing that physically she looks very right. Get the shoes right and get the clothes right. And if the shoes aren't right, then she's not right. Occasionally, you know, when you've been on your feet for 6 or 7 hours behind the rovers, there's a really nice temptation to go and put a pair of slippers on because nobody ever sees your feet, but I couldn't do that. Something would alter. It would be a betrayal to the character. Brilliant. Brilliant. I think she's done very well to survive with her particular physical image in this day and age. Thank you, honey. Brilliant. I'll see you in 2 scenes. She's now somebody who I am very, very, very fond of. She's a great friend. I'd love to have her living next door to me.
Oh, you can tell them there'll be no changes made just yet, Mummy.
Hey, hold your horses, yo.
Well, at any rate, it's nice to know I'm not signing on.
Of course you're not. You're a great asset.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I told you, didn't I? Didn't I tell you? Your job is safe.
And who else have you told, eh?
Quiet, please, fellas. It's a wild track.
Can't go for tea now.
Go on, go on.
Jack.
What?
You know what?
What?
I'm really happy.
Aye.
Look at the state of your couple pints looking like that.
But what about just nipping have a shower, son?
Oh, no, you don't. Rack, I want some bitter putting on.
Well, at least change my shirt.
There's no time, Jack. I'm under pressure, can't you tell?
Like a boat out on...
Deaf, I heard you the first time.
Huh? What's up?
Nothing's up. Good night. Isn't it about time you was getting changed, or do you intend to stop all night in your old bowling cardigan?
Oh, I've still got one or two things to see to, though.